Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Madhava Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Radha Mulidhar ki jai, Gaur Chandra ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Canto 10, Chapter 2, text 33. So I think yesterday Kavichandra Maharaj spoke, but I think he spoke on text 32 of chapter 3 and not chapter 2. So what I was thinking was I'll just do the Sanskrit of chapter 3, and then I'll read the English translation of 32 and 33, and then the purport of 33. Is that okay? Yeah. So I'll just say the Sanskrit myself. Tatanate madhava tavaka kvache drishyanti marga tvai baddha saurataha tvaya vigupta vicharanti nirbhaya vinayakani kapamurda suprabho. So I'll read the translation of text 32, since we didn't cover that yesterday. So this is chapter 2, prayers by the demigods. Someone may say that aside from devotees who always seek shelter at the Lord's lotus feet, there are those who are not devotees but who have accepted different processes for attaining salvation. What happens to them? In addition to this question, Lord Brahma and other demigods said, O lotus-eyed Lord, although non-devotees who accept severe austerities and penances to achieve the highest position may think themselves liberated, their intelligence is impure. They fall down from their position of imagined superiority because they have no regard for your lotus feet. This is text 32, and today's verse, text 33. O Madhava, Supreme Personality, by the translation improved by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Text 33. O Madhava, Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord of the Goddess of Fortune. If devotees completely in love with you sometimes fall from the path of devotion, they do not fall like non-devotees, for you still protect them. Thus they fearlessly traverse the heads of their opponents and continue to progress in devotional service. Purport. Devotees generally do not fall down, but if circumstantially they do, the Lord, because of their strong attachment to Him, gives them protection in all circumstances. Thus, even if devotees fall down, they are still strong enough to traverse the heads of their enemies. We have actually seen that our Krishna consciousness movement has many opponents, such as the deprogrammers, quote unquote, who instituted a strong legal case against the devotees. We thought that this case would take a long time to settle, but because the devotees were protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we unexpectedly won the case in one day. Thus, a case that was expected to continue for years was settled in a day because of the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has promised in Bhagavad Gita 9:31, Kaunteya pratijanihi name bhaktaha pranashyati. O son of Kunti, declared boldly that my devotee never perishes. In history, there are many instances of devotees like Chitraketu, Indradyumna, and Maharaj Bharata, who circumstantially fell down but were still protected. Maharaj Bharata, for example, because of his attachment to a deer, thought of the deer at the time of death, and therefore in his next life he became a deer. Yam yam mapi smaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram. Because of protection by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, however, the deer remembered his relationship with the Lord and next took birth in a good Brahminical family and performed devotional service. Suchinam Srimatam Gehe Yogo Brashta Vijayate. Similarly, Chitraketu fell down and became a demon, Vritrasura, but he too was protected. Thus, even if one falls down from the path of Bhakti Yoga, one is ultimately saved. If a devotee is strongly situated in devotional service, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has promised to protect him. Kaunteya pratijanihi, name bhakta pranashyati. But even if a devotee circumstantially falls down, he is protected by Madhava. The word Madhava is significant. Ma, Mother Lakshmi, the mother of all opulences, is always with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the opulences of the Lord. Yatra Yogeshwaro Krishna, Yatra Partha Dhanurdaraha, Tatra Shrir Vijaya Bhutir, Dhruva Nitir Matir Mama, Bhagavad Gita 1878. Wherever there is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and his devotee Arjuna, Partha, there is victory, opulence, extraordinary power, and morality. The opulences of a devotee are not a result of karma kanda vichar. A devotee is always protected by all of the Supreme Lord's opulences, of which no one can deprive him. Tesham nityabhiyuktanam yoga kshema vahamyaham. Thus, a devotee cannot be defeated by any opponents. A devotee, therefore, should not deviate knowingly from the path of devotion. The adherent devotee is assured all protection from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I seek blessings of all the Vaishnavas, especially the senior Vaishnavas here, Adi Purusha Prabhu, Arjuna Prabhu, so that we may be able to successfully glorify Srimad Bhagavatam today. So today's verse is, actually we're doing like a quick summary of yesterday's verse, since we didn't sort of touch upon yesterday's verse. So we'll try to sort of speak in a way that it addresses both 32 and 33. So in this verse, we're talking about how a devotee may accidentally fall down, but Lord Krishna, who is known as Madhava, the husband of Goddess of Fortune, if he bestows favor upon a devotee, then the devotee automatically gets all opulences. So in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna has this question. Krishna is walking him through different processes of yoga, like karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, etc. So when he's talking about dhyana yoga, about the process of meditation, Arjuna has this question. The devotees sometimes give up our existing path, that materialistic, especially if it's a materialistic path, we give up that whatever we've been following and we take to Krishna consciousness. So Arjuna has this question. So what happens if a devotee is unsuccessful? So doesn't that mean that he's given up his material pursuits, endeavors? So that's a failure. And he's taking up Krishna consciousness. And for some reason, if he's not able to successfully finish it, isn't that also not a failure? So Arjuna is kind of worried about that. It's basically like one of those tasks which has to be completed to its entirety. Like boiling water. Let's say your aim is to sort of boil it to like 100 degrees. And then you boil halfway or to like 70, 80 degrees. And then you stop it and then you come back the next day. You have to start right from the beginning. So it's one of those processes, some processes that you have to complete it to its entirety. So Arjuna has this question, what happens to such people who have, neither here nor there? Or another example given is, let's say you're on an island which has caught fire. It's a small island and it's caught fire. And then you've been told there's another island some distance away and you have to swim. So you start swimming in the ocean. So the island that you left is now out of sight. And the new island that you're trying to reach is still not in sight. And you're not sure if you're going to make it or not. So then you might have this fear that, okay, I've left what I had. Now I haven't achieved my destination. So you're kind of in limbo. Or you're driving, you reach a city and you fill up your gas. And then you start heading towards the next city or next destination. And on the way, there's no gas stations and you're out of gas and you're sort of stuck. So Arjuna has this question, what happens to such devotees who are neither here nor there? So then Krishna assures Arjuna saying, Prapti punya kritam lokan ushitva shashvati samaha suchinam shrimatam gehe yoga bhashta vijayate. That Krishna assures Arjuna that for such he explains there's two kinds of yogis or spiritualists. One who after a short time give up for whatever reason. The other is after a long time, after a long time of practice, they haven't achieved their destination. So he says after a short time, if someone falls. So basically, what is besides bhakti yoga? There's karma yoga. Of course, Vedas doesn't explicitly talk about vikarmis, but if you talk about karmis, karma yogis, jnana yogis, the goal of karma yogi is to attain heavenly planet. The goal of jnani is to attain liberation. So here Krishna says, Suchinam Shrimatam Gehe, that if you were a karmi, then you go to heaven. If you, after a short time, if you failed in your pursuits of bhakti yoga, then you go to heavenly planet that you would have achieved by karma yoga. And after many years in that heavenly planet, then you take birth in the family of some pious people or in the family of rich aristocrats. And if you've been practicing for a long time, then you take birth in the family of transcendentalists. So no matter what path you've been following, you still get the benefits of that path. If you were a karmi, you would have gone to heaven. You still go to heaven by practicing bhakti yoga and failing in bhakti yoga. So this way, Krishna assures that there's no loss or diminution in this process. And he says, Neha vikramana swasti pratyavayana vidyate swalpam sualpam apyasya dharmasya trayate bhayat mahato bhayat. Sualpam, even a little amount of devotional service will protect you from trayate mahato bhayat, danger. Even a little amount of devotional service will protect you. So this way, Krishna is trying to dispel Arjuna's doubt that, Krishna consciousness is like an insurance process. It'll protect you from the greatest danger. So in text 32 that we just read, and 32 and 33 we read. So in 32, the question is raised that there are some non-devotees, so if you want to use that word non-devotee, for someone who's following the path of karma, jnana, etc. Not bhakti yoga. Basically, anybody who's not following the path of bhakti yoga. They might perform austerities, they might perform penances and so on, and they do achieve perfection. It seems like they've achieved perfection, whatever their perfection means for them. And on the other side, devotees sometimes fall down. So this can be a little bewildering, all those karmis or whatever, even vikarmis or who are of a agnostic/atheistic mindset. Some atheists, you might see them successful, financially successful, good looking, power, money, everything. And devotees are struggling and they're falling down. And you sometimes wonder what is going on. Krishna is known as Madhava. Why am I not getting all the opulences? So sometimes we have this worry that what is happening? Why do devotees sometimes fall down? So it is explained that those karmis, jnanis, or even vikarmis, especially that verse 32 talks about jnanis specifically, that jnanis sometimes reach so-called perfection. So the acharyas explain that actually there's two kinds of jnanis.
Godruma Prabhu.
Yes.
You're talking about karmis, vikarmis, jnanis, vigyanis. Can you give a little background? What's the difference between a karmi or a vikarmi? What is that all about?
Yeah. So I'll repeat Ananda Bihari Prabhu's question for our live studio audience. So he's saying that, can you explain, give some background on what karmis, vikarmis, jnanis, or Ashtanga yogis, what it means. So vikarmi, to start from the lowest of the ladders, so to speak, vikarmis are those who don't follow the Vedic processes and engage in acts that are not conducive to spiritual life. So those are known as vikarmis. Those actions which produce unfavorable reaction are known as vikarmis. And then from above that is different kinds of practitioners who fall technically in the Vedic fold, which is starting with karmis. We use the word karmi in our colloquial language as, oh, he's a karmi. Actually, karmi is not a bad position. Karmi simply means that those who are following the Vedic scriptures for some personal enjoyment, but they're still following the Vedas, especially the 4 Vedas. There's a section of Karma Kanda which recommends certain purifying processes and sacrifices, yagyas, and so on, so that they get some material benediction. So those are known as karmis. And above the goal of there's 2 folds of karmis or karma yogis. So there's karma kandis who are doing it for some personal gratification. And then when they're sufficiently purified, then they're then raised to the level of karma yogi, where karma yogi understands that, okay, this is meant for the pleasure of Vishnu. So then he advances to the level of karma yogi. But in karma yoga also, there's twofold karma yogis. One is sakama karma yoga. One is thinking, okay, let me do it as an offering to Krishna, but still they are attached to the results. They're known as sakama karma yoga. And then sakama karma yoga then takes you to nishkama karma yoga, where you're detached from the process. So you're still working. Work is still your main goal, your main path, main process. Work is still your main process, but you're detached and you're surrendering the results to Krishna. So what happens in nishkama karma yoga is, one of the byproducts of nishkama karma yoga is it gives you jnana. So that's a natural byproduct of karma yoga. It purifies you and gives you jnana or knowledge, which then connects you to Krishna. And then that takes you to jnana yoga. So jnana yoga, actually, verse 32 is talking about jnana yogis who may seem to have attained perfection. But for the sake of our conversation, we can lump karmis, vikarmis also. They may temporarily seem to attain perfection. So jnana yogi actually is twofold. There's 2 types of jnana yogi. One kind of jnana yogi who is, the whole goal is worship of attainment of knowledge, and he might worship there's also bhakti involved in jnana yoga, but he worships in a disrespectful way, thinking as bhakti as an intermediate process, and in a disrespectful way he or she may worship the form of the Lord. And the other kind of jnani is he who worships with respect. So the acharyas explain that either way, bhakti has to be mixed with jnana for them to achieve liberation. It has to be jnana mishra bhakti. Just pure jnani cannot attain liberation. So it has to be jnana mishra bhakti, which gives the jnani a liberation. So it is said that the type of jnani who's disrespectful, who's doing jnana mishra bhakti, so that bhakti of such a jnani, what it does is it gives such a bhakti knowledge, it destroys sinful reactions, and then it takes the jnani to the stage of liberation. And then when this jnana mishra bhakti takes this jnani to the level of liberation, at that point bhakti withdraws, it goes away, and then the jnani falls down. So that's why it said that ye aniya arvindaksha vimuktamaninas tvayashta bhava avishuddha buddhya aruya karchena param padam tata. No, that's another verse. What is that? Padam padam tat vipadam natisham. That is another verse. Yes, anadita yushmadangriya, that they fall down. So that verse 32 says that such a jnani who, even if they reach to the stage of liberation, they fall down because bhakti takes them to the stage of liberation and then withdraws because their goal is not to worship Krishna. So it withdraws and then they fall down from that stage of liberation. So in case we might be worried that what's going on, karmis, vikarmis, jnanis, they seem to have reached the stage of perfection, and devotees sometimes fall down. So here we get this assurance that let's use this word non-devotees, just to lump karmis, vikarmis, jnanis. So we might feel discouraged, but what's the point? The point that's noteworthy is for non-devotees, again, for lack of a better word, for non-devotees, first there is success and then there's failure. So there's temporary success and then permanent failure. But for devotees, there's temporary failure and then permanent success. So this verse 33 then says that temporarily we might see that devotees might fall down. And the same thing Narada Muni is also telling Vyasadeva in Canto 1. He's explaining Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva is a little bewildered that he's composed all these scriptures and he's still not satisfied. So Narada Muni is trying to instruct him that better you stick to the pure processes of devotional service. Because even if you temporarily fall down, there's no harm. Now he says that Tyaktva swadharmam charanam bhujam harer bhajato apakvo pate tato yadi. How does it go? Yatro ko badram abud amushakim ko varta. Anyway, he says Tyaktva swadharmam charanam bhujam harer. That if a devotee, even if they fall down in their process due to not being in a mature stage, even then there is no harm. Tyaktva swadharmam charanam bhujam hare. Tyaktva swadharmam, even if they give up their so-called material obligations and they take to the process of devotional service, they fall down due to not being at a mature stage, even then there is no harm. But one who has sort of so adhered to his process of, yes, Anandevi, right, Prabhu. Okay. I hear some static, so I don't know if you wanted to share something, but so even such a devotee, if he or she has given up their so-called material obligations and duties, Tyaktva swadharmam, still there is no fall down. Narada Muni is telling Vyasadeva. So this also gives us some assurance that, okay, for devotee, there's no loss or diminution, like we discussed. But then still the question is, that why do devotees fall down, face down, and it's a little embarrassing. But the important thing is we still have to get up. It said that when you fall down on the ground, you take shelter of the ground and you get up. So for devotees in the path of bhakti, if you fall down, you still take shelter of bhakti and you get up. So the acharyas explain, especially in the commentaries to the Bhagavad Gita, that sadhakas have two natures. One is a conditional nature and a constitutional nature. So the fall down actually happens on the conditioned side, not the constitutional side. Constitutionally, we are Jivera Swarupohe Krishnera Nityadas. We are constitutionally always servants of Krishna. So the fall down happens on the conditioned side. So Shri Vishwanath explains that these two natures are like two train tracks. They go parallelly for a sadhaka. So for the most part, they're going parallelly, but sometimes the conditioned side sort of deviates. So what happens if the train tracks sort of start diverging and the train derails, right? Excuse me. So sometimes it might derail, but then the sadhaka then again brings it back.
What is the initial?
VCC, virtual credit card.
Huh? Someone wants to use your credit card? So anyway, I'm hearing some from the Zoom room. So my request to any devotees here who are connected to Zoom room, please kindly disconnect because last time I got kicked out. So if you're here present already, you don't need to connect to Zoom or internet. So this will free up some bandwidth because I get disconnected. Anyway, so like these two conditioned and perfect constitutional natures are like two train tracks, and sometimes they conditional, the fall down happens on the conditional side. So it is said that even if there is a fall down, Narsingha Purana says that even if there's a fall down, it's not actually a fault or a blemish. And the example given is like, just like a moon has spots, right? The craters, it might look like pock marks on someone's face. So those are not actually flaws. The spots that you see in the moon is not actually a flaw, because that doesn't prevent moon's effulgent nature or moon's ability to sort of dispel darkness at night. So those spots are not necessarily an impediment. So like that, even if a sadhaka falls, it's not an impediment as long as they're samyak vyavastito, so that as long as they're fixed up in devotional service, or at least convinced that this bhakti is the highest process, that even if they fall down, it's not exactly a fall down. The important thing is just keep continuing with your process of devotional service. Don't get discouraged because you've fallen down, or like, oh, poor me, and things like that. Once Brahmatirtha Prabhu was asking Srila Prabhupada about this point, why does this happen? Sometimes devotees suffer. So Prabhupada's response was, he gave a nice example, like just like a fan, it's spinning, and you sometimes unplug the fan, or you might turn the switch off. And the fan is still spinning for some time before it comes to a full halt. Not that when you turn the switch off, it comes, zoop, it just freezes. It just takes its time and then finally unwinds and comes to a stop. So Prabhupada gave that example. Like that for devotees. Also, yes, we have our past, we have our backgrounds, and when we take to Krishna consciousness, sometimes there might be some lingering remnants, and they stop in time. So the important thing is not to be discouraged or to be impatient. We're not going to be pure devotees in 6 months or a decade also. So it might take a while to sort of get over, but the important thing is we have to be situated in devotional service. So sometimes when we fall down, for whatever that means, the word fall down, it might fill us up with guilt and shame, and sometimes these feelings of guilt and shame can be so overcoming and overpowering that it can paralyze us, or you might even find it hard to get out of bed. It might feel so, for whatever anarthas we're struggling with, it can get so overpowering that it can just paralyze our devotional process. And devotional process is the remedy. So it's important not to get caught up in these feelings of guilt and shame. It's just part of the process. It's just part of the whole, it's nobody's perfect, and it's not expected that we'll be pure devotees in few months. And sometimes we can not only give ourselves up, we can also give someone else a hard time, or sort of make them feel a little judged. If they haven't come to the temple for 6 months, and then they come back and we ask, Prabhu, are you okay? Are you in Maya? Where have you been? Or, of course, I'm exaggerating, but sometimes there might be such an undertone of questioning. Where have you been? Have you been in Maya, or things like that? No, just because we haven't seen them, doesn't mean they have been in Maya. Maybe they've been a traveling Sankirtan devotee who've been living out of a band for 6 months. Just because we haven't seen them doesn't mean they're in Maya. But the important thing is we don't make someone feel like that, even if they were in Maya. Like I know one friend of mine who was on and off with bhakti, and he wouldn't come back just because of that. He was scared to see devotees for all the questioning. Where have you been? What have you been doing? Are you chanting? And things like that. Like, in fact, I remember this pastime during Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati's time. There was one brahmachari in the ashram who sort of was in Maya. He was actually in Maya. And other fellow brahmacharis were giving him a hard time. You're in Maya, or, And that devotee felt so bad that he just left the ashram. He felt he was taken over by this guilt and shame. That he just left the ashram, and he just left without telling anybody. And then shortly, there was some big festival. All the disciples were arranging for Bhakti Siddhanta. And it was a massive big festival, and Bhakti Siddhanta came. And then he noticed that this devotee, this brahmachari disciple, he's not there. And right away, of course, Bhakti Siddhanta being a pure devotee, he knew. So he asked, where is he? And none of the brahmacharis could say, they said, oh, he just left. He just fell down. And Bhakti Siddhanta, he wasn't upset at that devotee who left, but he was upset at other brahmacharis. And he immediately was really heavy with them, like bring him back, immediately bring him. I'm not going to start this festival unless he's back. I don't care if whatever you offer me, big festivals, big prashad and this and that, It takes blood, sweat, and tears to make one devotee. And if you lose it, it's like a big, big loss. Just losing one devotee is like a big loss. He said, I don't care, bring that devotee back. So all the brahmacharis were really in a perplexed situation, like, because nobody knew where he was. And they were like really scrambling frantically, like, what do we do? What do we do? We don't know. There were no cell phones or anything back then, right? So to contact. So they brainstorm, and one of them came up with this idea. They were trying to think, what? Before, Krishna consciousness was his inclination, and they knew that he was an expert watchmaker. So they thought, okay, let's go to every watch repair shop in that vicinity and try to inquire. So they went, and sure enough, they asked, like, is there someone new who's working here? And sure enough, they found that brahmachari, and they fell at his feet, like, Prabhu, please come back, Then they begged him, and they brought him back. So anyway, the point to illustrate is sometimes out of guilt and shame, we might just leave the process of Krishna consciousness. But the important thing is to see Krishna's magnanimous nature. It is said that don't see your shortcomings, but see Krishna's magnanimous nature. So Krishna assures us, apiche suduracharo bhajanti mam ananya bhak sadhur saiva mantavya samya vyavasito hisaha. He says apiche suduracharo. He doesn't say duracharo, bad. If he's even if he's committed an abominable activity, duracharo. He says suduracharo, extremely abominable activity. Apiche suduracharo, but bhajanti mam ananya bhak. If he's engaging in ananya bhakti, then he should be considered sadhu. He's not saying he should be considered devotee. He should be considered a sadhu. See, that is how magnanimous Krishna's heart is. He's adoshadarshi. It said that even if there is apparently a flaw in a devotee, Krishna just closes his eyes. He just turns his face away. In Krishna's heart, there is no room for his devotee's shortcoming. There is only love for a pure devotee, or devotee. In India, it is said that every mother would name her child Padmalochan. Even if a child is born blind, a mother will name her child Padmalochan. Padmalochan means lotus-eyed. Even if that baby is like blind, cannot see. But for every mother, her child is like the most beautiful child. For her, her child is like Padmalochan, lotus-eyed. So like that for Krishna, he doesn't see flaws in his devotees. There is no faults or flaws that he sees. So the Acharya is explained when Krishna is saying apiche sudaracharo, Acharya is sort of playing devil's advocate. They're saying Arjuna might think that how come he's such a person, suduracharo, not even duracharo, suduracharo, like abominable activity. How come such a person can be called a devotee? Then Krishna is saying he can be called a devotee because it is my order. By my order, he should be called. That is my order. He should be called a devotee. Then Arjuna says, okay, fine. I mean, devotee, but sometimes he engages in abominable acts and sometimes he engages in bhakti. So shouldn't he known as like part bhakti, like a impure devotee? So Krishna says, no, he should not be considered. He should be considered fully a devotee because samya vyavastito hisaha, because he's rightfully situated in his determination to engage in bhakti. So he should not be seen as has fallen down or like a karmi or vikarmi and so on. So this is Krishna. So that reveals Krishna's heart. Just like a hospital patient, you might see someone who's contracted some kind of a disease and then he or she is admitted to the hospital. So from that point onwards, it can be assured if it's a curable disease and if they're at the right hospital, you can take it for granted that they'll be cured. You shouldn't still consider them as like, So in a hospital, it's just a matter of time, someone recovers. So like that, having taken to Krishna Bhakti, especially Ananya Bhakti. So Krishna here says, Bhajantamam Ananya Bhak, meaning what that means is, as long as he's fully taken my shelter and he's not taking shelter of someone else, during his fall down, if you start taking shelter of someone else, then that is not Ananya Bhakti. So Krishna is saying, Bhajante Mam Ananya Bhak. As long as he's even in his fall down, such a devotee knows nobody else but me. He knows only me. He has no other shelter besides me. Besides me, he has nowhere to go. Even though he's fallen, even though he has shortcomings, he doesn't know anybody but me, and I don't know anybody but him. Krishna says in many verses, that, anyway, I'm forgetting those verses, but he says that for him, he's a friend in me and I'm a friend in him. I think chapter 7 or chapter 9, he says, So Krishna says that he knows nobody but me. So indebted to such a person. And even to Durvasa Muni, Vishnu is saying that sometimes, like especially when Durvasa Muni was picking faults in Ambarish Maharaj, so Vishnu was saying to Durvasa Muni that Aham Bhakta Paradino, he asatantra ivad vijas, sadhuvir grasta hridayo, bhaktair bhakta janapriya. He says, Aham Bhakta Paradino, I belong to my devotees. Aham Bhakta Paradino, he asatantra ivad vija. That I'm not independent at all. I can never act independently. I always take guidance and shelter of my devotee, and I'm acting in accordance with them. Sadhuvir grasta hridayo, bhaktair bhakta janapriya. That I'm not only do I give myself to my devotees, but to the devotees of my devotees also. So that is how Krishna is eternally indebted to his devotees. And furthermore, Krishna says, Apisiturachara, and then he says, not only should he declared a sadhu, but then such a devotee is never vanquished. He says, what is that verse? Shipram bhavati dharmatma, shasvam shanti nigachati, kaunteya pratijanihi, name bhakta pranashyati. He says, Shipram bhakti dharmatma. That he tells Arjuna that Arjuna declared boldly, my devotee will never perish. You can declare. And the acharyas explain that you can go to the town square and then drum about with the drum and declare boldly. That not just simply like, hey, Krishna said that my devotee. Is no, declare boldly, loudly, not just like whisper. Go to the town square and just drum about saying, Krishna has declared, Krishna's devotee will never fall down, So he says, Shipram Bhavati, like very quickly. Krishna doesn't say like, in time, finally, after struggling, he'll finally, after like centuries. No, he says Shipram, meaning quickly, very quickly he'll come. Shipram Bhavati Dharmatma. And how? How does quickly a devotee sort of attain perfection? That is because Krishna is saying that even if a devotee has so-called flaws, because they are engaging in Ananya Bhakti, I hold that person in my heart. I'm thinking of that person. So when Krishna holds someone in their heart, Krishna in Ishopanishad, Krishna is known as Ashnaviram Shuddham Apapavidam, right? Shuddham Apapavidam. Prabhupada brilliantly translates Shuddham Apapavidam as antiseptic and prophylactic. He uses these words, antiseptic and prophylactic. What that means is antiseptic means that if you have contracted a disease, by applying that disease or infection will go away. That's antiseptic. And prophylactic means that you won't even get it. So on both sides, you're covered. So if you take both, prophylactic is like preventative. So if you take to Krishna consciousness, it's prophylactic, you'll never contract a disease or infection. But even if you did contract, even if you did fall down, antiseptic, then by process of Krishna Bhakti, it'll go away. So Ashuddham, Ashnaviram, Ashuddham, Apapavidam. Ashuddham, Prabhupada translates as antiseptic, and Apapavidam is he translates as prophylactic. So like this, it is explained that Krishna says, declared boldly, O Arjuna. And again, there's two reasons why he tells Arjuna. Like in other cases, Krishna himself declares, right? What is that verse? Manvana, is that the word? Kaunteya Prati, no. In 18, Manvana Bhakta, Madhyajimam Namaskuru, Pratijani means. Anyway, I'm forgetting the second part of that verse. He says that always think of me, become my devotee, and you'll never fall down. I declare this because you're dear to me. So in that case, he declared. But in this case, Krishna is saying, you declare. And he says for two reasons. He is asking Arjuna to declare. One reason is Krishna is known as a prankster. He has this reputation of being mischievous and he's a prankster. So nobody believes Krishna. So Krishna might, and also the other thing is, Krishna sometimes breaks his own promise for the sake of his devotees. Bhishma had promised that he'll make Arjuna pick up his weapons. So then he broke his promise to keep Bhishma's word, and he picked up the wheel like a Sudarshan Chakra, and he charged towards Bhishma. So he broke his own promise. So that's why he's telling Arjuna that if my devotee promises, then I'll do anything to keep my devotee's promise. That's one reason why he asked Arjuna to declare. And the other reason why he asked Arjuna to declare, he says, Kaunteya Pratijani. He's saying Kaunteya, he's addressing Arjuna as Kaunteya, meaning, O son of Kunti. to indicate that you come from a family of like exalted family, son of Kunti. So then people will trust. If Arjuna declares, then people will trust it. He comes from a noble family. He's from a good family. So this way, if Arjuna declares, then people will believe. If Krishna declares, nobody will believe. Krishna is a prankster. Who knows? He'll play a quick prank on us. So this way, Krishna is assuring that Name Bhakta Pranashyati. Even if there's a fall down, you just keep taking to this process of Krishna Bhakti. And I give you, through the agency of my devotee Arjuna, I'm promising you, I promise, you won't be vanquished. Sometimes we have this fear. Krishna is saying, don't worry. Even in chapter 18, he says, Masuchaha. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, do not fear, do not hesitate, and do not worry. Thrice, Prabhupada is assuring. Just like Krishna saying, Kaunteya, Arjuna, you tell. Like that through Prabhupada also, Krishna is assuring us, Prabhupada, you tell these devotees. And Prabhupada is saying, no problem, Krishna. Do not fear, do not worry, do not. In the purport, Prabhupada says of 1866, Masucha, do not worry. If you take up to this process of Krishna Bhakti temporary, they might be fall down. There is no loss or diminution. Like Krishna says, Ananya Chintayastumam, Yoga Shema Vahamyam. I'll protect what you have and I carry what you lack. So this way, in this process of Krishna Bhakti, there is no worry. Don't worry about fall downs. And further, the same point is highlighted in the 11th canto also. Swapadamulam bhajata priyasya tyaktva bhajasya hare parisha. That one who has taken to the process of Krishna consciousness, swapadamulam bhajata priyasya, that one has taken to the lotus, taken shelter to the lotus, shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. Even if temporarily there might be some fall downs, even if they might temporarily engage in some activities, still by the virtue of their Krishna consciousness, they won't be vanquished. So the same point is again repeated in the 11th canto, that there is no loss or diminution in this process. But then still, you might not be convinced. There's still this fall down. I don't know, just it doesn't feel good about that. Because Krishna is explaining, right, like Neha Vikramo Nasuti, that Trayate Mahato Bhayat, the greatest fear, one will be protected from the greatest fear. And what is that greatest fear? Rupa Goswami, I think, explains in Nectar Devotion, right, that the greatest fear is losing this human form. Actually, there's no other fear, really. All these material suffering is not exactly the greatest fear is losing Krishna consciousness. That's what Prahlad Maharaj also says. When he sees Nrsingadev, all the demigods are all scared. Everybody's running here and there. All the demigods are also running. They're devotees of Nrsingadev, but still they're running. And Prahlad Maharaj says, I'm actually not scared of you. All I'm scared of this Maya Shakti. That's what I'm really scared. So Rupa Goswami says the greatest fear is losing this human form. So then you might say that, if that is the case, you're saying that devotees won't lose even a little amount of devotional service. Your human life is guaranteed in your next birth. You won't, But then in this purport, Prabhupada gives the example of Chitraketu in King Indradyumna. What is the third? King Bharat, All of them lost the human form. King Bharat was in the stage of Bhava. And at the stage of Bhava, he fell down and he took a animal form. What about that? Trayate Mahato Bhayat. You're saying that, your human form is guaranteed. So in response, it is that even if that happens, that usually doesn't happen, that you lose human form. Even if that happens, Krishna will personally change the rules that even in an animal form, you'll be Krishna conscious. He'll move heaven and earth for you to be Krishna conscious. So sometimes Krishna may arrange that, not so much as bhakti is not powerful, but he sometimes does that to further enhance our bhakti, to further enhance our hankering to be with Krishna. So in the deer form, Bharat Maharaj was further, even more yearning to be with Krishna, And the example of Chitraketu when he was Vritrasura, and the example of King Indradyumna. So what that means is when fall down for devotees doesn't mean fall down externally, but falling from our devotional constitutional position. So that is what Krishna is assuring, that you will never lose your bhakti. So one should see that temporary fall downs might happen, but the important thing is bhakti doesn't get lost. So that is the main thing that happens. So I'll just wrap up in a few more minutes and then we'll open up for discussion. So this way we see that there might be some kind of fall downs, but one shouldn't get discouraged. And even fall downs are of different types. Some fall downs are circumstantial. Some fall downs are like a conditional fall down. We fall down due to conditional nature. And sometimes fall downs could be, arranged by Krishna, for our purification. So like circumstantial fall down is like something is a trigger, acts as a trigger, some kind of a drug addiction or sex addiction or alcoholic or whatever that is, circumstantial. And sometimes it could be conditional, that's our conditional nature. For example, it might be your conditional nature to just be angry, and we see example of people falling down because of anger. Vishwamitra Muni got really angry and he cursed Menaka and he fell down from his position. So like that, so fall down can also be conditional. Like that, like for example, we see Kaliya in the 10th canto when he's chastised by Krishna and he's sort of he's humbled basically. And then his Nagapatnis are offering prayers to Krishna, and then Kaliya himself offers prayers. And in his prayers, he's telling Krishna that, oh Krishna, after all, we snakes, we are conditioned by our conditioned nature. It is our nature to be envious. It's my nature, unfortunately, that's who I am. I really regret and lament this. It's regrettable, but this is unfortunately my conditional nature. And he says, who but you can help us overcome our conditional nature? On our own, how can we overcome our conditional nature? But if you desire, then I can overcome. Even though I'm a snake, as a snake, it's my nature to be hissing out of envy and to bite people. But if it is your desire, then even though I'm a snake, I can overcome my conditional nature. So Kaliya is saying, so through Kaliya's prayers, we can sort of take solace that even though by conditionally conditioned nature, materially conditioned nature, we fall down. But if Krishna wants, we can overcome that. So it's important to know that our conditioner, because I've had discussions with some of my friends who have been really discouraged. They feel, oh, I just can never overcome my nature. It's just, one of my friends was almost in tears, So we can take solace from Kaliya's prayers that, like, if Krishna desires, don't think how big your problem is. Think how big Krishna is. So when you approach Krishna with that mindset, Krishna desires, then he can help us. So then we might wonder, then why do we fall down? Why does this still happen? So there's a nice verse in Bhagavatam. Actually, it says that in the 11th canto of Bhagavatam, it says that we fall down. Let me pull up this verse. We fall down because sometimes, just give me a second. I would like to pull up this verse. It's a beautiful verse. It's in the 11th canto, 11:28-28. It says that just as an improperly treated disease reoccurs and gives repeated distress to the patient, the mind that is not completely purified of its perverted tendencies will remain attached to material things and repeatedly torment the imperfect yogi. Just like an imperfectly treated disease, sometimes there can happen a relapse. So that's why, just like a disease which is like not fully cured, there might be a relapse. Like that, sometimes our mind is not fully purified. And that's why sometimes our anarthas also relapse. So don't be discouraged, even if some anarthas relapse. Like in Madhurya Kadambini, Sri Vishwanath explains 5 stages of anartha nivritti. He says ekadesha vartini, bahudesha vartini. He says praiki, purna, and atyantiki. That it's like anartha nivritti, or our process of purification of heart, can be 5 stages. First, it is like incomplete, and then it is more pervasive, it is more widespread, and then it is almost
time for Q&A, Prabhu. Time for Q&A. 5 minutes.
Okay. I'll just conclude with one statement that these 5 stages of purification, and the main thing is final takeaway is the best process of purification is the chanting of the holy names. This is the best process of purification. So even if you are sometimes discouraged, please stick to this chanting of holy names, both Japa and Harinam Sankirtan. And through this process, one will completely overcome all of our anarthas. Not maybe of our own endeavors, by Krishna's mercy. Krishna in this verse is known as Madhava, the husband of goddess of fortune. And by this process, all of our anarthas will be overcome. Like Devotees says, Ahobataso to Gariyan, that by the process of chanting the holy name, even someone who's low-born is known to have performed all sorts of austerities. Anyway, I had many things to share, but now we can open up for some Q&A and reflections.
I
Yes,
want to say really great class.
thank
Really
you.
loved it here. But you know, it brought up a few things in my mind, like what you were saying about don't make someone feel bad. Like there's an old statement, don't judge, you'll be judged. You know, not to be so self-righteous in that. And it also brought up, I once read this book, How to Be a Sinner. Now, at first hand, what? Everyone knows how to sin. The problem is usually not to sin. But what the writer was saying was that you should, if you have no guilt, then it's a problem. You have no conscience. But if you have too much, then you fall down. You can't get up. You have to learn. You're not perfect, but you have to keep striving and working at it.
Thank you. So that's a beautiful reflection. What's your name, sir?
Alan.
Adam.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So the important takeaway from your reflection is sometimes there can be a regret, which can be a healthy regret. So one shouldn't go to either extreme that one becomes so callous that one keeps on committing sins, or the other extreme is one just gets paralyzed by guilt. So somewhere we can develop some healthy regret by which can be really purifying. And like the saying goes, as the cliched saying goes, every sinner has a future and every saint has a past, right? So thank you for that beautiful reflection. Any other reflections, comments, questions, or corrections? Adi Pusha Prabhu.
I'm not sure. Unless she does that, nobody can hear me.
No, I'm unmuted, so they can hear me through.
Oh, okay.
I can also repeat, actually. Yeah.
Okay, so that yesterday,
We can't hear the question. We couldn't hear that.
Adi Pusha Prabhu.
Hey, Hare Krishna. Very similar.
We can't hear. We cannot hear. We cannot hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, very similar to the question Emily was asking yesterday or the day before, and Angel was mentioning about how a certain amount of regret is helpful. And then beyond that, it can become counterproductive and discouraging. So the balance comes when we say, I make mistakes, I'm fallen, I may not be perfect, but Krishna is so wonderful. So part of humility is to glorify the Lord. And without that, it's just like, oh, I'm so little, I'm so small, I'm so, So we want to say that even, and you made the point like 10 times today in class that the criteria for success is not that I did this and I achieved this level, but Sangsadir Hari Toshanam. The criteria is Krishna is pleased. And like you said, because Krishna loves us, he sees if we're trying our best, he's satisfied with that. We had one of Radha Swami's Vyas Puja homages, and one older devotee said, over the years I've had trouble. I've had difficulties. I have not been perfect. But I always felt that Maharaj that he loved me. That he wasn't thinking, well, he's not such a good devotee. I just like the good devotees. No, he said, no, maybe I'm not such a good devotee, but I'm trying. And he sees that, and he's pleased by that. And he's always been sustainably encouraging, affectionate, respectful and loving toward me. And through all the dark days, ups and downs, that was constant. It was very moving to hear that. It was a personal, not only is Krishna like that Krishna loves us, if he sees we're trying, he's consistently the same toward us, but the devotees are like that too. Like you mentioned, Bhaktisiddhanta was instructing his disciples, we're in this together. And, we're meant to encourage and support each other. Well, glories to Prabhupada.
Thank you, Prabhu. Maybe you can mute yourself. Any other thoughts or questions?
Hare Krishna, Gajam. Thank you for class. I just, as it's such a beautiful class, as you were speaking, I was reminded of two things from my childhood. I was brought up very, 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 very Catholic. And the story of the prodigal son, even as a small child, like always gave me such encouragement. And the choreographer, George Balanchine, I don't know, because I was also a dancer, he made a beautiful ballet, one of his first, he was only like 26 years old, I believe, of the prodigal son. And at the end, he has a very tall dancer in this long cloak. And the dancer preparing the prodigal son crawls up. And it's a tremendous feat to pick up one full grown man, pick him another full grown man. But the dancer picks him up and encloses him with a rope. And that's how the ballet ends, with the one dancer cradling the other. And as you were speaking, I haven't thought about that in such a long time. That's what I could feel, that Krishna picks us up and then envelops us and then just cradles us, no matter what abominable thing we've done. So thank you so much for reminding me of that image, because it's such a beautiful one, feeling oneself cradled by the husband of the goddess of fortune. Such a wonderful thing. So thank you.
Thank you. Such a beautiful point. We feel like cradled by Krishna in our bad times. Like Sachinanda Swami would say that in bad times, we're in Krishna's left hand, and during good times, we're in Krishna's right hand. But either times, we're with Krishna. Anupam Prabhu?
That's another point to consider as well. The story of
I can repeat.
Story of junior high, I believe it's junior high das who accepted the renounced Buddha in some way, brahmacharya, sannyasi, brahmacharya, but he looked lustfully upon a woman, and she kind of rejected him. And he said, I can't stand to see the sight of anybody who claims to be in the renounced order, who claims some high position, but actually behind closed doors is not really representing those principles. And so I like that point as it goes along with this one, that yes, Krishna is there for us, and he forgives us, and he loves us, and he'll accept us as long as we're being like authentic and honest, as that verse says, if they're actually properly situated in their determination. But if they're fooling people and claiming to be some high person, when in reality behind closed doors they're drinking water underwater on a fast day, and that's when you might feel some distance there.
Yeah. So Anupam Prabhu, for those who online couldn't hear, he was giving example of Junior Haridas and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu banished. And that can also be done for the protection of devotees. Krishna sometimes tries to protect other devotees if someone else is trying to sort of be a poser or pretender. Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
How this works, if they can hear.
How this works, if they can hear.
Yeah, now
Hare Krishna. Can you I have to.
No, you don't.
They do something over there. Oh well. Hare Krishna.
So,
do we have time for any other comments or questions?
He's not going to say something. Anyway, there's an interesting thing about that prodigal son story. I'm not sure who can hear this or what to do, but I'll try to tell it. There's an interesting, in the Buddhist tradition, there's also that story of the prodigal son. And not only does the father sees his son who's gone away for a long time, and he comes back and he's looking in the garden, and he's out, that's my son. And the says, go get him. And when they go to get him, his son, who's become like a homeless guy, and he's very afraid that people are going to beat him or something, he starts to run away, and then he collapses. And the father says, well, it's him. I go, he looks terrible. He's been gone for 10 years. And bring him back, and then give him some food, clean him up, give him some clothing. What's wrong with him? He doesn't even recognize us. He's so fallen. So he said, keep him around. Give him a job in the stable, cleaning the horse stable. And then the father, who's actually the master of the house, and the father of the son, who the son can't even recognize, he takes a job as the assistant stable cleaner. Just like Krishna comes into this world as an ordinary person. He becomes like acting like a servant in the house, and gradually the son sees this old man helping him, and the relationship is revived. So Krishna is so amazing that he actually reaches out and comes down to however low we've fallen, and helps to open the door again so that their relationship can be revived. The son rejected his father, went away, became totally crazy and covered over, but the father never forgot. I don't know what to do about this.
So yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. So unless any last minute 10-second comment, question. But Grantraj, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Wonderful class.
Thank you.
Thank you, Godruma Prabhupada. Beautiful class. Very giving.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, dear devotees. Have a wonderful day. Don't run away from Krishna. He's cradling you. You're always welcome back. He won't judge. Okay, Hare Krishna.